good evening. My name is David Hayes. I've been employed at JP Morgan for almost 30 years, and during this period had many different roles and responsibilities within the engineering department, from managing the maintenance contracts throughout EMEA to major data centre builds and various construction projects. Over the years, I've had the pleasure to work with many highly talented people from all backgrounds and walks of life. This evening I'd like to say a few words to give an insight into how the workplace at JP Morgan has changed over the last 30 years, and finish with discussing the original Embankment construction project, which was completed in 1991. I'll then hand over to Mike Doyle of TP Bennett and Kevin Mulligan of Structure Tone, who managed the recent building refurbishments. The early years. This slide shows you the 60 Victorian Embankment. It's a model. Obviously it was done before CAD, and this was a model that was 2 square metres. What most people don't realise is that the site, the 60V campus, covers not just this building we're in, the old school building, the building behind, but also the building across the street. So the basements are linked. There's actually 10 stories, of which 4 stories are actually below the ground. So it was quite an engineering task, because opposite, as we know, is the Thames, and the basement's 24 metres deep. So you've got to keep the Thames out. You're well below the water table there. So back in 1986, JP Morgan was a different company in many ways. The company was much smaller. It was called Morgan Guaranty Trust Company of New York, and office life was much less hectic, and most employees knew each other by first name, even in different departments. Today's office is considerably different to when I first joined the bank back in 1986. So we had a tea lady that used to deliver tea and biscuits to our desk. Can't remember her name, mind. There was no PCs, no email, no internet or intranet. So in those days, to communicate, it was by phone, or we used to use a triplicate memo pad with carbon paper. So internal memos were typically handwritten using this triplet book, commonly called a ping-pong memo, which was used to keep track on progress, and letters were typed by the secretary on a manual typewriter. So engineers had no need to type, and as a consequence, the secretary used plenty of bottles of correction fluid, as invariably they couldn't read our handwriting, as engineers are not prone for neat handwriting. In those years, you waited for post to arrive, or used the fax machine for urgent issues. And in 1986, we had Big Bang, and the London Stock Exchange moved to electronic trading. The bank shortly built its first trading floor for around 50 traders in a building less than a mile from here, 1 Angel Court, which has now been knocked down and been rebuilt. And we started looking at that time for a new headquarters, which would become 60 Victorian Embankment. And traders for many years had CRT screens, like your old TVs. Used to give a lot of heat off. Some of them had up to 12 screens. The heat was immense, and we had to design the engineering infrastructure to dissipate that heat. And we went for underfloor cooling. We didn't want water on the trading floor, so we done it with air, which meant very deep floor voids of a metre. So we now have 3,500 trading positions over at our new office in the wharf there at Bank Street. So this is not one of our traders, I may add, but a hard day in the office for one trader, and that used to be the situation where I suppose one trader would try and have more screens than the adjacent, but the traders would be working on different markets, so they wanted a screen indicating that particular market. In the late 80s, as we were all on call, we were issued with a mobile phone. Because phones, obviously, there was no mobile phones at that stage, to complement our pager. So there's 3 of my phones up there, the brick on the left, which you couldn't actually put in your pocket, obviously. So people used to come up to you in a pub and say, "Can I have a look at your mobile phone?" Anyway, the pager was fine, but if you was out, you couldn't find before mobile phones, you couldn't find a telephone box that actually worked. So it was no good for conference calls. We never seemed to have conference calls in those days like today. Also in the late 80s, the internet arrived. And staff were issued with a PC and an email address. The only issue was most consultants at the time and most organisations didn't have an email address, so we were still faxing to them via our PC. About 6 months later, everybody started to get emails, and then I suppose today's world started really, where you get inundated with hundreds of emails each day and not enough time to do anything else. So by the mid-80s, JP Morgan were looking for a new headquarters building in London. Several areas were reviewed. Broadgate and the Wharf were discounted at the time due to cost and infrastructure concerns. Eventually the bank acquired the site of the former City of London School for Girls, which is across the road, the Guildhall School of Music, which is also across the road, and the City of London School for Boys, which is the building we're in now. At the rear of us, where the office block is where their playground was, and dining areas and stuff. So on this site, there's a 40,000 square metre office, and it cost 400 million to build it back in 87. So we started it in 87 and it was completed in 91. And due to St Paul's Cathedral height restrictions imposed on the planning application, we had 24-metre deep basements, and we actually removed 250,000 tonnes of spoil from those basements. I mean, it gives you an idea there how deep those basements are. When we started to remove the spoil, contaminated land was discovered, because on this site, back in 1820, was one of the largest gasworks in the country. So there was arsenic found in the land, and that had to go away and be treated. So that was cleared. The gasworks was cleared to make way for the City of London School to be built back in 1883. Also, as part of the planning, shows you there the basements and the adjacent buildings. That's from the front. So, also due to planning, we had to retain the facade around the Guildhall School of Music and Drama on the island side. There's pictures of it later on, which was a challenge because the bank wanted to demolish it and then rebuild it, but the planning authorities wouldn't allow us to do that. Throughout the site, we have these piles, which you can see the hole there. They're just over 1 metre wide, and they go down 24 metres. And during the construction, they come across the gasworks foundations, and they were 7 metres thick, and the core drills had to go through that. Also, there was timber found there, because it used to be a timber used to be stored on site, and it was buried. So, around the perimeter of the building, these are various pictures there during the construction. That's the facade on the island site being retained. And that's the main site. We're at the top end, where this photograph is actually taken from this building across the site. So it's a hectare. And the round holes are all the piles, which go down 24 metres. And then a person would be lowered down that pipe to attach the steel girders to the pile cap, as it's called, and then lifted out, and then it would get backfilled in with concrete. But around the perimeter of the building, to keep the Thames out, can't see it on there. Around the perimeter, there is what's called seeping pile construction. It's a concrete wall of piles that interlocking piles that are metre thick, that while the concrete's still green, they cut into each other, and you actually have a wall of interlocking piles that actually retains the any water. It prevents the water entering the basement. And that's ventilated. So onto the old school building. This building is a Grade 2 listed building, and it was founded by John Carpenter, who was a town clerk, an MP, and the site was constructed, as I said, between 1883 and 1886. It cost £100,000 to build then, which in today's terms would be around about 10 million. So on H1, which is the lower entrance, was the school dining and kitchens. On H2, where we just met below the grand staircase, was the library and the secretary's room. And here was where the school used to hold their assemblies in the morning. And during the construction, there was a concern because the back of this building started to come away from the front. Cracks started to appear, and at one stage they thought they would actually lose the back half of this building, but fortunately enough, they managed to resolve that by underpinning it. So during the construction project, all this room was restored. The gold leaf was replaced, the roof was replaced with Welsh slate. I think that cost about £1 million back then. And in this room there is some, obviously the honours are up with famous people. There's a former Liberal Prime Minister, Ashworth, he's up there, behind there, with his honours. And another guy that used to attend this school was a person called Theodore Bailey, who was awarded the Victoria Cross in World War I for bravery under fire. So at this moment, I'll pass you over to my dog. Thank you.